Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Warren Bebbington. I'm Vice-Chancellor of the University, and welcome to the second of our Research Tuesdays for 2014. I should first acknowledge the Gunner people, the original custodians of the Adelaide Plains and the land on which our campuses here at North Terrace, Waite, Theberton and Roseworthy are built. Great to see such a good turnout once again at Research Tuesdays, and if you've been with us for a while you might remember a presentation here by Professor James Payton a couple of years ago on E. coli infections, and a week or so ago we had the great news that Professor Payton had won a massive research grant of $8.9 million from the National Health and Medical Research Council to further his work on a range of deadly infectious diseases, and the Federal Health Minister Peter Dutton presented that grant along with some others to him here 2 weeks ago. Tonight though we're looking at something quite different: behavioural economics of cooperation. Our speaker, Professor Ralph Bayer, is Associate Professor and Deputy Head of the School of Economics and Founder Director of ADLAB, the Adelaide Laboratory for Experimental Economics. He studied economics, social psychology and political science at the University of Cologne and Bonn in Germany, and received his PhD from the London School of Economics before joining the University of Adelaide. He's published in leading economics and economic psychology journals, and has presented his work around the world at conferences and invited seminars. He currently holds 2 Australian Research Council Discovery Grants. Professor Bayer's main research interests lie in behavioural and experimental economics and game theory. His topic, as you can see above, is why sharehouses are always dirty. Ladies and gentlemen, Associate Professor Ralph Bayer.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. I think first, before I start, I have to thank you all for coming. If anyone had said there would be so many people coming today, I would have said it's crazy, because it's Mad March in Adelaide, so I'm really happy about that. Also, before I start, I want to thank the University of Adelaide, the Faculty of Professions and my school, the School of Economics, for supporting my research from the beginning. In particular, 11 years ago, when I arrived here as a fresh lecturer and had the crazy idea to establish a laboratory. Back then there was no experimental economics laboratory in Australia yet. I got the support, and I have had this support all the time. Now let's get into the topic today: why sharehouses are always dirty, the behavioural economics of cooperation. Behavioural economics is a relatively new strand of economics, and relatively new subdiscipline that is somehow located in between economics and psychology. You will see where that is going to lead in a second. So let's make sure that this works. Actually it doesn't. This is the typical thing. Oh, very good. I will be there in a second. Okay. This is the big picture today, the whole map of things I want to talk about today. I want to start later on with telling you a little bit about the problem of cooperation, then what traditional economics says, talk about experimental economics, my subdiscipline, talk a bit about one of my recent research papers, where we then finally get to the point to explain why sharehouses are always dirty, give you a bit more of an overview what we have learned about cooperation, and we'll finally conclude. Okay. What lies at the heart of any cooperation problems. It's a social dilemma. Social dilemmas are very, very difficult things for a society to solve. Let me define what a social dilemma is. A social dilemma is a situation where a cooperative action would be improving social welfare. But unfortunately, it's not individually rational. This is very dry now, very, very, very abstract. Let me make this a little bit more concrete. What does improving social welfare mean? So there's this action, the cooperative action. If that action is taken, then the sum of benefits for all the people that benefit from this action is greater than the cost of actually taking this action. So overall, a society is better off if this action is taken. However, on the other hand, the cost to the person who could take the action exceeds the private benefit. So we have a situation where if an action were taken, everyone would be better off. However, the person who could take the action has no incentive to do so. I have a little silly example trying to give you an even more concrete flavor of this. Suppose we have a joint project, 4 people. Could be keeping a share house clean. It could be a joint venture. It could be 4 heads of state trying to solve climate change problem. Many, many scenarios are possible. And suppose now that our little yellow man contributes to the group project. So does something that is cooperative. That causes some pain for this person. Our yellow person is unhappy. However, it also increases the value of the joint project. So here, that's the increased value. Now, because of the project being a group project, all members of the group get something back for it. For simplicity, just think that the value of the group project is split equally. Then what happens is, 3 people are really, really happy. I haven't done a thing, but I get something for it. So the house is clean. Someone has done the dishes. Someone has cleaned. I haven't done it, so red, blue, and green are quite happy. However, our yellow person still is grumpy because the benefit he or she gets back from taking the action is actually not worth the effort for this individual person. Then, while it's individually not rational to put in the effort to clean the house, socially it would be beneficial because the total benefit that is created through this cooperative action is greater than the individual cost. So you can see this hold-up problem somehow that a person has no incentive to be cooperative while it would be worthwhile for society. I'll give you a few examples. Because you might now think, okay, share houses, well, not very important, not a very important thing for a whole society. I'll give you lots of examples to try to convince you that this is actually a more serious problem than it seems to be. Lots of examples, the scale and the economic importance varies. So there are lots of examples. Let's start with the really, really small ones. Think of a group assignment here at university, has this structure, can be a social dilemma. Co-authorship for academics, got quite a few projects that never got off the ground because nobody wanted to do the work. A clean share house. Let's look at bigger things. Business joint ventures, team production, non-informative advertising are still small but economically more important. Team production could be a sports team but also in the workplace. Let me quickly talk about, for a second, about one of my favorite examples, non-informative advertising. What is cooperation there? There, the cooperative action is actually not to advertise. If advertising is non-informative, then companies only try to steal customers from each other, meaning that actually in the end it's a waste of money, the advertising. If both try to steal, the companies are all worse off after advertising. And there's this natural experiment when tobacco advertising was banned. What happened to the profit of the companies, of the tobacco companies? Went up. That proves that this was actually a social dilemma situation where their advertising, their non-informative advertising, was non-cooperative, and they couldn't overcome this. Okay, then let's go to even larger problems. If my machine doesn't freeze up, that would be ideal. Yeah. Okay. Then, on a national stage, there's something we typically call public goods, safety, security, enforcement of property rights, infrastructure, all too expensive for one person to do this, but socially beneficial. That's where typically governments step in and provide these things. And the really big ones, carbon dioxide emissions. So taking the bicycle instead of the car has quite a large cost for an individual, and the benefit for this one person that this gives us with respect to reducing emissions is very small. However, if we sum this up over the whole world, all inhabitants of this world, it would probably be socially beneficial to take the bicycle for society. Common pool resources, fisheries, for example. The cooperative action would be to take out less fish, to have more sustainable fisheries. However, individually, to take this action is not rational. Individually, the individual rationality would say take out more fish. Tax competition, trade policy. In trade policy, think about discussion about Qantas and so on. Other countries subsidize their national airline. This is also a social dilemma problem, not to subsidize your airlines in different countries. So then, this is really a bit annoying that we have. So my observation actually is that social dilemmas are actually not negligible exceptions. There are so many of them around that we actually should think about how we can solve them. What would economists say? Traditional economists would say the following. This is against Public Lecture 101, never put up an equation. I won't go into too much detail there, just to make sure that the economists among us see that I have deeply looked into that, and that my gross simplification, what general economics says about humans' motivation, is based on a deeper insight. So humans, we typically say humans do what gives them their preferred expected outcome. So that would mean that given that it's not individually rational to actually cooperate, that would therefore mean that humans do not cooperate without any additional help. That would be our prediction. So what can be done? Suppose people really are behaving and motivated the way we think, as traditional economists think, what could we do to get them to cooperate? There are a few different ways, and they are all happening. One would be if people were to meet again and again in the same social dilemma situation, repeated interaction, the probability to meet the same person again and again being high enough, people might be able to sustain cooperation by threatening, I won't cooperate in the future if you don't cooperate now. Unfortunately, in the same situation, never to cooperate is also a stable solution, so we can't be sure that this works. Another thing is contracts. If you think about what are contracts for in this world, one reason why there are contracts is actually to solve social dilemmas. How can that work? Think about a social dilemma situation where everyone is better off if everyone cooperates. Why not just write a contract? We both cooperate. If we don't, we pay huge fines. Social dilemma solved. And it's in the best interest of everyone, and if you can choose to write this contract, you would do it. That happens a lot. Lots of contracts are actually there just to solve social dilemmas. However, the world is messy. A contract can't take into account all possible contingencies and so on, so it doesn't always work. And if there are more people involved, the transaction cost to write the contract might be too high and wipe out all benefits. Regulation, government says, here's a law, you have to cooperate, otherwise I'll throw you in prison. Some laws are like that, not to litter, for example. Often it's a bit heavy-handed, inefficient, one size fits all, therefore it's not ideal for all situations. Then we have incentives. Lots of companies provide bonuses and so on, which can also help to solve social dilemmas. That's sometimes quite expensive. There's the other side, you can punish people. One example is of punishing people for doing non-cooperative things is sin taxes. Think of our carbon tax. I won't talk more about this, but that is a discussion right now in politics. These are the things that can be done and that are done. But now the puzzle. Even in situations where our standard theory would not predict that people cooperate, we sometimes see people cooperating. So something with our standard assumptions up there must be wrong. So everyone does the thing that is best for themselves must be wrong. But what is it? And now behavioral economics and experimental economics kicks in. This is where we are now leaving traditional neoclassical economics and become a bit more modern. So, some candidates. Why would we observe people to actually cooperate in situations where we wouldn't predict it? Number one, bounded rationality. People don't understand that's in their best interest actually not to cooperate. That would be a very, very nice thing if confusion actually would lead to something that is positive. Could be. Another thing is other regarding preferences. Clearly, we all somehow don't only look at ourselves, our material outcomes. There could be altruists, people who get a warm glow from other people doing well. Inequity aversion, people could be feeling some guilt to be better off than others, and on the other hand, feel very, very bad about being worse off than others, feel envy. If people have preferences like these, we probably can sustain cooperation. The last one here, taste for social efficiency. People might have preferences such that they are willing to give up and sacrifice a little bit of their own material wealth if that is for the greater good. That increases social efficiency. The next block of potential explanations is that actually we don't only care about the outcome, but we also care about how we get to the outcome. So we feel much better when an outcome is reached through something we perceive as fair. Or we care about the intentions of others we interact with. We are reciprocal animals, meaning that if we feel or believe that someone wanted to be nasty to us, we want to be nasty back. If someone was nice to us, we want to reciprocate and be nice back. Self-image, clearly, if I think of myself as being a cooperative person, I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of personal wealth to be consistent and to keep up that self-image. If I care about what others believe about or think about me, and a society thinks that cooperation is a good thing, I could be willing to pay a little bit for being seen by others as someone who is cooperative. Now, we have now a few explanations, right? Why some people might be cooperative even in situations where it's against their rational self-interest or whatever. Now, if you want to figure out what actually drives that, we need an empirical tool to look into that. And our tool is experimental economics. What would we want to do? We would like to control the incentives individuals have and would want to control the material outcomes for people. We would like to exclude social, contextual, and situational cues, not because we don't think they are important, they're very important, but I think social psychologists are better at looking at that. And if we strip a situation of these and still observe cooperation, then it's a very, very robust phenomenon. And we want to draw causal inferences. That's why experimentation is great, because that helps us with that. So in a nutshell, what is experimental economics? What are we doing? We take subjects, often students, sometimes not students, and put them in a controlled environment. Down there you see our laboratory. We ensure anonymity and let them play games, computer games, interactive games, where we pay people according to their actions in these games. That gives us the opportunity to induce, we call it induce, preferences as if they were in a social dilemma situation somewhere out there. We are not only using the lab for looking at cooperation, lots of other things are investigated in the lab, but for this talk here, we look at cooperation, and so there, in the profession, some kind of a workhorse environment has actually developed, which is a public goods game. And it works the following way. Take a group of players, say 4, that could vary, give them some tokens, endow them with them, say 20, and they have to decide simultaneously how many of these tokens to put into a group account, how many in a private account. The private account pays $1 per token. The group account pays only 40 cents. However, the group account pays 40 cents for everyone in the group. And then I can use my silly drawings again, because these silly drawings are exactly the situation. So then it's individually not rational, because a token in the group account pays $1 individually and only 40 cents if I put it in the group account. Therefore, individually not rational to put money in the group account. And socially it would be beneficial, because, okay, putting it in the private account, it gives $1 for the group. Putting it in the group account, it gives 4 times 40 cents, $1.60. So this is exactly this situation where this tension between the best for the group and the best for the individual arises. Okay. Very quickly, I walk you through one of our recent papers, and this paper tried to separate out the confusion hypothesis that people don't understand that they that individual rationality would prevent them from cooperating, or that something else is going on. This has just come out in experimental economics. This is joint work with 2 people in Europe, Elke Renner and Rupert Sausgruber. They are in Nottingham and Vienna, with also an affiliation in Copenhagen, so we're quite an international team here. So what's the question of this paper? There is the stylized facts, and this is probably the most robust observation in experimental economics. Hundreds of replications of this public goods game everywhere in the world show something like this. So people at the beginning, on average, cooperate and put 50% of the tokens in the group account, and then it declines over time. Ah, share house, right. It's reasonably clean at the beginning, but over time, it gets dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. Okay. And our question is now, is this pattern due to initially confused people? Yeah, I don't know what I do, put a few tokens in there, and then over time they learn and realize, oh, actually I'm better off if I don't put the money in the group account but keep it to myself. The decay learning. The other hypothesis would be there's some kind of a social process working, and you can guess the answer, right? It would be boring if it were confusion learning. How are we going to investigate that? What we would need to be able to do is to compare behavior and learning of confused people and a typical normal subject, right? That's what we would need to do. However, I can't see inside of people and can't figure out whether they're confused or not. So what we're doing, we induce confusion by just give people only subsets of the information. So we induce confusion in a way that people are in a situation as if they didn't understand what to do. We have three treatments. One is the standard game, so the well-defined social dilemma, information on being in a group, existence of a group project, then the 40 cents and the dollar, so the information about the payoff, they know everything. We have the second condition, which is low information, so their people don't know how their payoff is determined. They know that they're in a group, they know that there's a group project, they know that they can contribute or not, but they don't know how the payoff is determined. They only get the feedback at the end of each round. So basically the game is a bit like assign tokens to a group project without knowing what it does. And then there's something like confusion, not understanding the payoffs. And we have a third condition, which is the one that is inducing confusion as ignorance, where people just don't understand anything. So people don't know that they're in a group, they don't know how the payoff is determined. So it's basically a game like pick a number and see what happens. But they get the feedback about their payoff after each round, so they can learn. Okay, so then let's look at the results. The first result is quite striking. The two conditions where we withhold information, there are no differences. You observe exactly the same thing. So what we see here is that the dark line is the normal condition, and the learning condition pooling these two confusion treatments is the gray line. It looks a bit similar, but it's not the same. So, similar but not identical dynamics. The decay in the standard game is stronger, so it cannot only be learning. There's something else going on, right? Because the learning can clearly be happening in both situations, but there's something different between the standard game and the limited information game. More evidence for that can come from this. Okay, on the left-hand side is the learning condition. Again, the data, that's the dark line. And then I have a gray line. The gray line is a standard learning model. Reinforcement learning, very simple, what that would predict. Wow, this fits really, really well. So basically, in our learning condition, we pick up how people learn. That's great. If we try the same thing with our standard condition, there the learning model doesn't do well. The learning model, the gray line, doesn't explain the data well, so it's much, much flatter. So what we conclude is learning model fits the learning condition, but not the standard game. The conclusion is that confusion learning is not sufficient as an explanation for cooperation and its dynamics. But now, what is it? And now the $64 million question, why are share houses always dirty in the end? Looking a little bit deeper into the data, we observe something. We observe that you have a heterogeneous group of people, and some people are selfish. They play zero all the time, so no cooperation. That's how traditional economists think the world runs. Then we have a few people that are really, really nice. They contribute regardless of what others are doing, very nice. They're altruistic. Then we have a bunch of people where we don't know what's happening. So where it's really, really hard, quite all over the place. These people could be really confused. And we have what we call conditional cooperators, and that's the largest group. And actually, it's this mix that produces the sharehouse dynamics, as I call it. Let's see what the conditional cooperators do. The conditional cooperators are actually these reciprocal people. They say, okay, we should all be nice and contribute, and they start contributing and cooperating, and they will cooperate as long as others do also. And that's when the sharehouse goes well at the beginning, right? People are still cleaning. But there were about 25% of these selfish bastards, right? So you'll probably meet one of them. And if you're a conditional cooperator at the beginning, you realize, oh, not pulling his or her weight, so I get upset. I reduce my concern for the others and reduce my cooperation. I get frustrated. But because there are typically about 2 of these conditional cooperators in the same sharehouse, you see that the other conditional cooperator reduces the cooperation, and you get more upset. And so any goodwill and cooperation that was there at the beginning just falls apart. This is the sharehouse dynamic. And I guess if you had have a little bit of an experience yourself, I think that matches that quite well. But now the question is, if, as I said at the beginning, cooperation is so important because there are so many situations where cooperation plays a role, we need to discuss how can we improve it. There were the traditional ways. Sometimes these traditional ways do not work. So there are many, many studies about this now, and there are two elements to it. The one element is, can we lift this line, right? Can we improve the level? And the other one is, can we prevent the corrosion, the decay of cooperation from happening? And I've just put a few things together. There's probably much more out there still, but these are probably the most important one. If we give people the opportunity to punish, to pay a little bit of money to punish people who are not cooperative, that works well. Increases cooperation levels sometimes up to 100%, and also prevents the decay. There's one caveat there. If you're not always in the situation with the same people have to punish a lot. And punishment is also costly, so the overall welfare does not necessarily have to be higher because people punish a lot. And in some societies, there's something weird going on, which we call antisocial punishment, where the people who are cooperative are getting punished. Strange. Then the other thing is, lots of people would have said, okay, if these people can communicate, talk it through and whatever, that should help. It helps, raises the level a bit, but doesn't prevent the decay. If people make promises, I'll be a good boy, I'll be cleaning the bathroom, at the beginning that works, increases the level of cooperation. Decay is still there. Then, if you as a group are competing with another group, you're more cooperative within group at the beginning, but again the decay goes away. By the way, this is a male phenomenon. Females don't react to group competition. That's the males. Then one thing that seems to work really well is if we think of an environment where people break up. If I don't like my partner, I'll run away and find someone else. That works really well to increase cooperation if either breaking up is costly, think of a marriage breakdown, right? Quite costly. Or if the reputation of someone is known when this person looks for a new partner. This is the eBay story, right? eBay should not exist if the world were like traditional economists think. The reputation system there makes it work. It is a social dilemma situation that is solved by the reputation system. The decay can also be prevented if both happens. If breakup is costly on the one hand and reputation is known. So if you want to keep sharehouses clean, we have to get an internet reputation system going where people can look up, oh no, I'm not going to move in with this person because this person didn't clean up in the last sharehouse he or she lived. Then observability, if someone observes you, that's quite unclear. There's lots of different studies out there that's not really clear. Then leading by example, someone, yeah, I'm the great cooperator, I start cooperating and you follow, increases the level, decay is still there. The one thing that works if the person who is the great cooperator and leads by example is later on observing what you are doing. There's a beautiful field study that has to do with the speed at supermarket checkouts. If the person who is working the hardest and is known to work the hardest sees the others, they are getting much faster. Okay, this was a really quick run through things, so I'm almost getting to the end. Let me just quickly conclude what I've been talking about. So, I tried to convince you that social dilemmas are lurking everywhere, that resolving them is important because it is social welfare enhancing if we can overcome them. Some are taken care of by contracts, governments, incentive mechanisms, and so on. But we sometimes observe people cooperating in the absence of all these things, and that's great. However, typically cooperation erodes. So we need to think about ways to help people to cooperate more, raise the level, and to keep cooperation up, prevent the erosion later on. A few things that work, that was just what I went through before, reputation mechanisms, allow groups to form endogenously, people generating some kind of a group identity, punishment opportunities, careful, antisocial punishment, and punishment is also costly, and the observability by leaders. There's probably more. What else? Despite of all the work that has been done already, there's much to learn still, and lucky for me, because that's my work. And we should do much more on this, and with we, I mean us, the economists, social psychologists, neuroscientists, and sociologists. Thank you very much.
Ralph is happy to take questions. Can you just wait for the microphone to come up? We've got 2 roving mics because of the size of the theatre.
Thank you very much. A delightful talk. I wasn't sure with your experiments whether you said that you looked and you could find groups within your experiments, whether that was an ad hoc analysis, a post hoc analysis, or whether you had determined that initially that there were these people who were altruistic, cooperative, etc.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Going deep down into methodology. Clearly, you should, before you look at that, determine what you are looking at, what the groups could be you're looking to find. So you have to define that beforehand. And there were studies before ours that were hinting at that, so we didn't do it post hoc. However, how will you prove that, right?
This is a comment, not a question. I've been running share houses a long time, and I've got two that are clean all the time.
Okay, and how are you doing it?
I recognise quite a few of your positive strategies, which I've learnt over time, and I've adjusted to that and adopted them. But the one thing that made the greatest difference was putting a note on the fridge where everybody signs every week that they've done their half hour or pay $9. That made the biggest difference.
Okay. It's almost like a contract.
There's a question at the back here.
Thank you for the talk. It's very interesting. When you said you found ways to increase the initial cooperation, most of them still saw a decay. Did you see the rate of decay faster, slower? Did it decay to the same level, or was there a final state of difference of cooperation?
So the very interesting observation with the decay is, if you play this 20 rounds, you end up close to rational equilibrium 10% or close to zero. If you play it 40 rounds, the decay is slower, but it ends up at about the same level. So it goes over the time of the experiment. Moreover, one thing that's also very interesting, you can generate beautiful things we call restart effects. So you play this for 20 periods and say, oh, we play another 20 periods. Cooperation jumps up again and goes down again. So it's not a continuous decline then. So that is it's more evidence that there is something more social going on than just a learning hypothesis as well. The speed, I simplified this a lot by saying, okay, these factors are able to keep cooperation up. These factors are only able to shift it up. It's often a mix, and sometimes the decay is slowed down for a while, and then you get a sharper drop exactly at the end.
Question down the front.
I find this very interesting with the comparison between the materialistic or the capitalist type person who relies on the money, as our audience member mentioned here, and the comparison of that to the eBay type thing where it's purely on reputation. But eBay does base that reputation, or the result of that reputation ends up in them losing or not losing money in the future. So at the end of the day, it's very materialistic. So my thought as you were running through your talk made me think of a very similar method to what this fellow was saying, is everyone puts in $5 and the person who does the cleaning at the end of the week takes the money or takes out so many dollars per clean, and I reckon that might...
Yeah, that would be a contract, basically, or an incentive mechanism that clearly works if you can verify that someone really has done the cleaning and cleaned properly. That might be a little bit of the problem there. You could say, yeah, I cleaned, sure. But yes, and that's happening a lot. These contracts, if you go out into the business community, a large class of contracts is actually just there to overcome these social dilemma situations, which work a little bit like that.
Time for a couple more.
More about the share houses.
The other important thing is zero tolerance. If you begin to tolerate small infringements, they multiply.
Yep.
If you jump straight on small infringements, you don't get more.
That's clearly the case what we found as well with the conditional cooperators. If you can destroy their goodwill really, really quickly, but you can hardly ever get it back.
There's another one at the back.
What are the other antisocial cultural issues that you mentioned? Or is that too deep, indeed?
It's a bit deep, but in some, so these punishment studies where people were allowed to punish, were originally done in Germany, in Australia, in the UK, and so on, and it worked perfectly. And one of the students, PhD students of the person running those, liked traveling, and so he ended up somewhere in Russia and thought, why don't we play these games in the lab? And there they observed that people sometimes punished the do-gooders. That led to a further study going all over the world, doing this all over the world, and they found societies where this antisocial punishment is quite strong. And these societies typically had norms that were such that people were seen as do-gooders when they cooperated. The best example there, I don't really want to say it because I'm German. The country where this was very, very strong was, what do you expect? No, Greece.
Let's take this as the last one at the back.
Now it's working, right? Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I was just curious if you could identify any cofactors. So you've been talking briefly about, for example, that there was a difference in within group cooperation or competition in males.
Yep.
So I'd be curious to see if to hear about if you found differences between males and females, and let's say between different age groups, or also maybe professions, because people, for example, working in social professions might be more inclined to cooperate versus different professions, let's say.
Yeah, that's a great question. The reason why I mentioned that the group competition only worked for males is because it's one of the only gender effects we find in cooperation. Psychologists have done more than economists on this, much more, but overall the gender effects are not very strong. In different situations, females might cooperate a bit more, sometimes a bit less, but overall, there is not a big difference. Another point, you talked about age groups. The hypothesis for a long time was also that people, as they get older, would become more cooperative. Also not true. In other domains, we observe lots of differences, lots of gender and age group differences, risk behavior and so on. Cooperation, there is actually not much. There are big meta-studies where the people find tiny differences but need huge amount of data to get that significant. So the effect size is very, very small.
Well, I'm sure Professor Bay will be here for a few more moments if you'd like to ask him something informally, but can you all join me now in thanking him for this? Our next Research Tuesday is on Tuesday the 8th of April, where Professor Stephen Nichols, Professor of Cardiology, will be talking about the latest in preventing heart attacks. Hope to see you all there, and meanwhile, Ralph, you need to drink this. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.